All right, good evening. We're learning the sugya of Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, the Mishnah. In the art scroll, it's 73a1. Okay, so we're continuing in the theme of last Mishnah, which was talking about above Machteret, the person who tunnels into someone's home, that you have a right to protect your property by killing the person, the intruder, unless you know clearly the person has no intention to harm you. As we explained in the last sugya, in the last Mishnah. Here we continue about who are you allowed to kill in a situation where the person is going to be harmful. The question is, who is he being harmful to, or she's being harmful to, for that matter. But if you see someone pursuing to do something, either to someone or to something, in what scenarios are you allowed to take action to kill the person that's about to do something horrible? So we go into the Mishnah like this. The Mishnah's wording is a little challenging. Rashi touches on it. These are the people that you're allowed to kill them. You're allowed to save them by killing them. It means by taking their life from them. So what's the case? You see a person chasing another person to kill that person. So you see someone about to kill someone else, and you have an opportunity to intervene and kill the rodef, the person that's chasing, the pursuer, and save the person that he's or she's pursuing. So Torah says you're supposed to kill the pursuer, which is the rodef. This is a general law of a person who's a rodef, someone who pursues. It manifests, like we learned last week, in different cases. It doesn't always mean there could be scenarios of childbirth where the baby, the fetus, is considered a rodef, a pursuer to the mother, because the mother would die in childbirth, which is like what we're going to learn soon in the story with Rachel, whose yahrzeit is tonight. So a person who's rodef, a person who's pursuing another person to kill that person, you're allowed to intervene and kill the pursuer. That's case number one. And someone who is chasing a male to molest him. You see another male chasing one male to molest him, to rape him. So you could intervene and kill the pursuer. Hey Bruce, we're just starting the Mishnah on 73a1. So last sugya, we learned about the cases of when it's permissible to kill someone who tunnels into your home. And we went in through the details of that. What does it mean? What is the certainty, and why does the Torah allow a person to kill someone who tunnels into their home to rob them with the intention to kill them? Now we're continuing along the line. So the Mishnah starts on top of 73a1. This is a complicated sugya. It says, these are the people that you could kill them. You could save them. Atzilun means to save them with their life. A person who's pursuing a friend to kill the next person, and you have an opportunity to intervene and kill the pursuer. So the Torah says you should kill the pursuer because that person is going to kill someone else. So you have to. That's the typical law case of a rodef. A rodef is a person who chases another person to kill him. Him or her, whoever's doing the killing, whoever's being killed. So you, as a person, a bystander, can step in and kill the pursuer. Again, this is the typical case, a person running with a gun or a knife or what have you. But there's other scenarios where this plays out. For instance, in the case of childbirth, the halacha wonders about the law of a mother who's about to die in childbirth, is if the fetus is considered a rodef, because the fetus is going to kill the mother through childbirth. That's one case. So one case is a pursuer to kill them, you're allowed to kill. Next case is zachar. A person's pursuing another male to molest the male, and you could intervene and save this other man from being molested. So you should kill the pursuer. The next case you're allowed to is naira me'ursa, a woman that has been engaged to be married. So she already has a husband. So we're going to see soon what is the basis of this. But let's assume now the idea is of honor. She has honor. She has her already. She's betrothed to someone, so it's her honors at question, and you're allowed to kill the pursuer who wants to rape this young woman. Aval, however, those are the three cases that we have, and we're going to learn what do they include. Aval harodef acher behema. If someone's chasing a animal to molest the animal in bestiality, or hamachalas Shabbos, you see someone that's about to transgress and violate the Shabbos, obviously with warning, and the person doesn't want to stop. And someone who's running to serve an idol. I think you're on two, Bruce. You're on two computers, which is fine with me. If you're chasing, or you see a person chasing a pursuing an avodah zarah, idol worship. So hey Shaki, we're just in the Mishnah. You cannot save them with by killing them. So the Mishnah says 173, Shukri 173a, we're continuing with the sugya of when you could intervene to kill someone. So the three cases you are allowed to kill someone, I'm going to learn Rashi in a second, because Rashi, if one analyzes the words of the Mishnah, seemingly, if you see someone pursuing another person to kill that person, who are you saving? You're saving the person that's being the person. Hey Ariel, see, I had faith in you. Who when we're starting the Mishnah. So page 73a1. So the Mishnah brings three cases where you're allowed to intervene to kill a person, and three cases that you're not. The wording in the Mishnah is Shematzilan Oisam Benavshan. You're saving seemingly the pursuer, not the one who's being pursued. You're saving the pursuer from committing a crime. So you see a person chasing someone with a knife. What's the focus? The focus obviously is that you're trying to save the person that he's trying to kill. But the wording of the Mishnah is that you're actually saving the pursuer, because the pursuer, he or she, is going to commit a crime of murder. And better he be or she be killed than become a murderer. That's how Rashi understands it. But either way, where you're allowed to, if someone's chasing an next person to kill the person, if someone's chasing a male to molest the male, someone's chasing an engaged woman to molest her, in those three cases, you could kill the pursuer. If, however, a person's chasing an animal to molest the animal, or a person is running to desecrate the Shabbos, or to serve idols, which are also punishable by death if the person were to commit those crimes. So you would think, like Rashi says, you're saving them from committing a crime. So why would you not save them from committing these crimes? The Mishnah says, no, those crimes are not crimes. Yes, if they do it, then there's warning and all that. Bezdin will deal with them. The courts will deal with them. God will deal with them, but that's not something for you to intervene. I just want to read the Rashis, because again, there's a lot of Rashi and Tosfos on this, just to explain the Mishnah and commentaries. But the simple wording of the Mishnah is like Rashi says, "Ve'elu shematzilan oisan min havera." Who are you saving? You're saving the pursuer from committing a crime. Once that's the definition, that you're saving the pursuer versus saving the person who's being pursued, that makes sense. If you see a person's about to get killed, you have to save the person's about to be killed, right? So that makes sense. And then it would make sense why seemingly Shabbos, idol worship, and maybe an animal wouldn't be included. But the Mishnah says that you're saving the pursuer from committing a crime, avera. Benavsham. So Rashi says, "Nitni laharig l'chol adam k'dei latzilo min havera." When we cry nafki, you are any person who's in this position to help, while a person is chasing someone else to kill that person, or to molest another male, or to molest an engaged woman, you can save them from themselves, from doing an avera. And we learn it from verses why this is permissible. So the next Rashi, I want to read them, because again, Rashi is defining the Mishnah. The Rashi says, what happens if you observe a person chasing an animal, lirava, to molest the animal? And you see a person about to commit idol worship. And you see a person getting ready. This is the third Rashi on the Mishnah. You see a person pursuing an action to desecrate the Shabbos. V'chol shekain shar krisis amisas bezdin she'ein or any other violation, Rashi says, that's not sexual in nature. I mean, are there something else that they would be doing that would be punishable by death, that's not related to a sexual crime? That surely you're not allowed to kill them to save them from doing the sin. Rashi defines it. Only something that's related to sexual crime. The three cases are, of course, a murder. But outside of murder, the only cases where you're allowed to kill the pursuer is if it's a sexual crime. And there's another definition. The person who's being pursued is going to be pogam. Pogam means be damaged. A person, the Gemara is going to learn soon, what is the damages of an engaged woman versus the damages of a male that's been molested. Meaning, pogam also doesn't just mean damaged goods; it also means it's highly embarrassing, offensive, etc. Kigoin, he gives an example. What is a pogam? What were you really offending someone? Zachar, if a person is molested another man. Benayim ursa, an engaged woman. It's a very aside from the whole experience of being raped. She's an engaged woman. She feels her husband may not want to be with her now. But that's we could add to those. However, when it comes to murder, a person who's trying to murder someone else. So we have a clear verse that teaches us that we're going to learn soon in the Talmud, where a person who pursues another person to kill for murder, that you step in and kill him first or her first. Why do we add about a person pursuing an animal? Because one would think that's also a sexual inclined a sin, and maybe that would be included. And now why do we add also idol worship to tell us that what would you think? I would have thought that that we would learn it out of a kal v'chomer, that maybe we would kill someone who's pursuing to idol worship, as we'll study later in the Gemara. The Shabbos nami tita b'gzer Shabbos, and also we would have thought someone who desecrates the Shabbos. We'll learn later in the Gemara what's the thinking, why we would think maybe we kill someone who's trying to desecrate the Shabbos. So the Mishnah basically, what Rashi defines is that what we're going to learn is that any woman that's being raped, she's not allowed to, you could kill them. But the paigeya, the embarrassment is less for a woman who's not engaged or a woman who's married for an engaged woman. The Torah has a sensitive, we see clearly, there's a whole portion of the Torah that talks about in Parshas Kiseitze the sensitivity of the engaged woman who is being molested, that not only is, of course, the horrible experience of the molestation, but also vis-a-vis her situation of being an engaged woman and before she's married. We know that in over in the times of Hanukkah, the whole story of Hanukkah happened because of a situation like that the sisters of the Maccabees was being taken from her wedding night to be molested by the Greek general, which was accustomed up until the Dark Ages in Europe as well, to molest the bride. And she turned to her brothers in the story of Hanukkah and said, hey guys, when Dinah was being molested in Shechem, like we're going to learn soon in the Torah, Shimon and Levi stood up. Where are you guys? And she awakened within her brothers, the Maccabees, Yehuda Maccabee and his brothers, to go in and kill the head of the Greek, and that started the revolt of the Maccabees against the Greeks. But it was based on this story where they were protecting the honor of their engaged, soon to be married sister. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. So we have three cases where you're allowed to intervene. Again, Rashi, not everyone agrees with Rashi. Most commentaries say that the word matzilin oisan is really talking about the person who's being pursued. It doesn't make sense that we would kill someone to save them from a sin. We're being sensitive to the person who's being molested or killed. But Rashi learns that we're saving the pursuer, obviously by the same time we're saying the person who's being pursued, but the focus is we're saving the person from sinning. Now, I just want to say, by Rashi saying that brings if I could say this, that brings a religious kind of tone to the whole law of Rodef. Once again, the law of Rodef is that we're protecting a person who's going to be killed, right? That you're allowed to kill the pursuer who's going to kill someone else, or the person who's going to molest the male or the engaged woman. But yeah, go ahead.
I assume we're going to learn if there's a specific manner in which we're supposed to kill these persons, because what it's saying here, and it seems unclear to me, is the halacha here in the Quran says that where did it go? All Jews are obligated to save a potential victim, even at the cost of the pursuer's life. So that sounds to me like there's no dealing with Beis Din. You're just supposed to kill them. And it seems odd because every other death penalty we have has a prescribed death penalty.
No, we're going to learn soon, 100%. If you could,
Ariel,
go ahead.
sorry, Rabbi.
Sugar.
I was going to say, Ariel, this is it reminds me a lot of an early form of a Good Samaritan law that we have modern times.
Yeah.
You can't just watch somebody get stabbed. You got to go in there and take care of it, even if it means killing the person. If that's the end result of
Right. No,
protecting
I
someone's life,
understand that.
right?
It's just interesting
It's strange
if
it's not
that's
worded
the case
that way.
here because every other case we have a prescribed method of doing it.
Right, like if you're going to save somebody, you can only save them with a baseball bat or a wrench. You can't do it with a
Right.
hammer or your knife,
Which
right?
wouldn't
Like,
make any sense.
right.
No,
Fernando was saying something.
no. I mean, I'm saying you're right. I think we're going to touch on that. Halacha is going to be that if you could hurt the person or even maim the person without killing them, you should. I remember, if you guys remember, we spoke about this before, but Bruce maybe remembers, there was a big case in Brooklyn in the 80s where someone was there was a crime being done, I think, in the subway station, and it became a very, very hot racial case. And I think it was a policeman, but I think the problem was that he shot one extra time. And he shot the person committing the crime, but then he shot him extra time or times. And it became a huge case. Why did he shoot him that extra time? He could have just shot him one time. He maybe shot him twice or three times. One of those cases where maybe he let his gun run. I mean, I don't remember the details of the case. My brother Alter, was telling me about it. But this is something in the 80s, I think the early 80s, that happened, and it was a big racial case in New York City. But that's the idea. Like when you're protecting someone, in what manner are you allowed to? The Gemorah is going to touch on this, but there's no bezdin over here. Like Shuki says, we're not talking about you have time to say, let's freeze the screen and bring in the bezdin, and this is happening in seconds, and you have to make a decision, and you have to protect. But what I was getting at is that when in like the Good Samaritan law that Shuki's talking about, is that what is the foundation of it? Is, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe at the depth of it, it is actually like what Rashi's saying. But I would assume that the idea is that someone's about to be killed. You have to protect the person who's going to be killed, right? The question is, one life against. We learned last week. There's two people that are going to, either he's going to be killed or she's going to be killed, right? So if the person is going to kill two people, so you save two people for one. But here you have a murderer. The difference is no matter what the circumstances is, you're going to kill him, even though there's one person dead here. But the person who's the first person, the second person would be killed. The first person would end up killing. So here you're killing the killer, even though the end result is one person dead. But when Rashi words it to say that it's about saving the killer from committing a crime, that kind of makes it a ruchnistic, a kind of a halacha thing, that you want to save the person from committing murder. So then it's not so much about saving. Of course, it's because the murder would be someone would have to be murdered on the other end of it, and you're saving that person by default. But the focus is saving the person from committing the crime. I don't know, Bruce. Maybe you know differently. Is that anywhere a basis in American law that you're looking about protecting the criminal from committing a crime versus protecting the crime from being done?
No, I'm not aware of anything in American law that requires bystanders to act to prevent a crime from being committed. But I do remember a situation in New York where a man was committing a rape and people were observing from their apartment buildings, and they didn't do anything. And it caused a great deal of consternation in the media because nobody called the police, nobody intervened, and it was very, very shocking. I don't remember the name of the woman who was the victim, but it was very famous, and it was probably in the 1970s or 80s, but my memory is not so good anymore.
Well. I guess what people were appalled was that no one protected the young woman.
Right.
It wasn't that they were saying, let's protect this person from committing such a heinous crime. And Rashi actually, by saying it that you're protecting the criminal, is because the Torah actually, in a way, if you think about it, what the Torah is basically saying is that we're not saying the criminal is the scum and we don't care. We just want to make sure that because he's ready, when he's ready to do such an act, we don't care about him anymore because now we're protecting the victim. The Torah actually cares about the criminal as well, because he's a person or she's a person, whoever's the criminal in this case. And Torah is saying that you're about to commit murder. I don't want to allow you to do that. And even though the reason is because you're also protecting, according to Rashi, Rashi's not avoiding the fact that you're protecting the victim. But the wording of the Mishnah clearly says Matzilin Oisan Midnafan is focused on the criminal versus the victim. All right, that's Rashi's pshat. Not everyone, most people don't learn like Rashi. I believe it's the Nemuki Yosef, the Rambam. I think also is the Rambam, the Nemuki Yosef on the Mishnah, which are both contemporaries of Rashi, do not learn like Rashi, and the focus is all about the person being pursued, the victim versus the criminal. Okay, now stay in the Gemara. Now we're going to try to first of all establish the fact. How do we know that you're allowed the din of rodef? I mean, how do you know that you're allowed to kill a pursuer for death? Tanu Rabbanan, the Gemara says, "Minayin the acher chaveri lahargei shenitin la'atzili b'nafshay." Where does it say? What's the source? You have to have a mocker, even though logically it makes sense. But what's the mocker? What's the mocker that you're allowed to kill a person who's by the way, the obvious question over here in this whole case is the case of Pinchas, right? Pinchas, in no way was what Pinchas, when Pinchas killed Zimri, the prince of Shimon, and the female princess who committed the sexual act in front of Moshe and in front of the tabernacle. There was no rape being done then. It was an act of indecency, but it wasn't. So the question is, why was he allowed to?
I'm almost certain that Rashi over there says it was also consensual. Like it's part of the idea is that they both intentionally stood there to do that in front of in front of the tent.
Exactly, and that's why it's not so simple. There's a lot of miracles. He had to also have a din of erodif. It's very quick. It's not, doesn't fall into our Mishnah. Put it that way. That's a different law.
It's very interesting because in general terms, the concept of the din of erodif in general, it's meant. I'm just thinking about the words that you were using a minute ago, and you were saying that it allows you to kill someone. I think that there's a different spin on it that the Gemara is trying to put, which is that you're allowed to go as far as killing the person to stop this thing from happening, which is different than you're allowed to kill them. I know a very subtle difference there.
Absolutely.
But I think that the idea of the din rodef, even in the case of Pinchas, is that he was doing it for a specific purpose that was in its zealotry. And like, if not for that itself, like he was able to go even to that point of killing someone to stop what was happening, and it's just categorizing it as something where it was I used all of my other choices, and it's in the event that this person is going to sit in front of a Beis Din, or actually if it was for death, it'd be sitting in front of a whole Sanhedrin. If they were sitting in front of the Sanhedrin, they'd be able to stand underneath the rodef law and say, I was doing my part to help, and this is where it took me, but they wouldn't be punished for having gone that far.
Actually, your point is well noted and correct. The idea isn't that when you see someone about to kill, that you have to kill the person. You have to prevent the crime from happening, even as far as if the only way to do it is by killing the pursuer. 100%, very good. It's a subtle difference, which is a major difference. I mean, it's not like the Torah says when you see a murderer, go, kill him because he's about to act. He deserves to be killed. We have to prevent the murder up until killing the pursuer. But actually, the case of Zimri, of Pinchas, I think is actually different, where he could have possibly stopped them, and it was an act of he was punishing them by killing them. It means he wasn't like he could have done. That's why it says Rashi says he was very specific to use the spear, or what he used the spear to kill them both in the act of intercourse, to show that it was the act of intercourse is why he killed him. I think actually in the case of Pinchas, it was actually a punishment of death. In the case of the rodef, which is 100% noted and correct what you said, it's that you have to protect either prevent the act of murder or protect the person from being murdered up until killing the pursuer. Whether you look at it,
I see that juxtapose the handful of things that it says in the Mishnah that you shouldn't that you aren't allowed to go that far for. So if you were going to intervene in any of those other crimes and it would result in that person's death, you wouldn't be able to claim yourself a rodef in front of the in front of the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to say, well, this person was about to desecrate the Shabbos. I helped that person. It doesn't work like that. Shabbos, avodah zarah, and bestiality is not included, but anything that's in the sexual nature that we'll learn, it's included, not just those two cases, but those are the two cases the Mishnah bases it on, and obviously the case of murder. Okay, so thank you, Tushuki, point well noted and correct. Now the Mishnah brings down the Tanur Rabbanan. The Gemorah says Tanur Rabbanan. How do we know that you're allowed to kill the person if need be? Like Shuki pointed out, in the case, that's the only way to stop the act of murder. Talmud Loimer. So we have a verse. The verse says, clearly, seemingly, don't stand there and watch the blood of your friend, so to say, being spilled. It means you see someone means just standing there, like Bruce said the case in New York, just standing there. So the Gemara says, 1 second, time out. Even though that verse makes sense to teach us about the laws of Rodef, but we need that verse for something else. The Gemara says, is this what the verse is coming to teach us? We need it for something else. And what's the something else? Another case where a person just stands there and doesn't get involved in helping a person. Like the time we learned. Minayin, how do we know? You're standing there and you see a person drowning, and you could jump in and save the person. And you say, well, I don't want to bother. So how do we know that you're not allowed to say you have to save the person? Or if you see an animal pursuing a person to kill him, or you see thieves coming to kill someone, right? So people are breaking into someone's house to kill them, which is seemingly the din of Rodef, but it's not Rodef. There is a case of there's a crime being done, and in the midst of the crime, the person will be killed. And you can protect the person, that you're obligated to protect the person and save the person. So don't stand there. Meaning to say, the verse is not being used in the case of preventing a murder, so much as not you can't stand by and just be an observer of a death happening, not a crime. The point is not the crime; it's the death. Because the question is, the case of listim of robbers should be compared to the case of a regular rodef. What's the robbers? The robbers are people that are going to kill when they come to rob. But it's about the death happening as opposed to the murder happening. Means the basis is, how do we know that person can't just stand by and say, I'm not jumping in to help this person. I'm not jumping into the river. Obviously, this case, the case has to be analyzed, and up to what point do you have to do that? We had a case, unfortunately, I think it was last year in Eretz Yisrael in Ashdod, where anyone who knows the Ashdod beach has a river, some sort of marsh that comes into the Ashdod beach, and this woman, her child fell in, and there's some sort of tidal wave within a whirlpool or something, and someone jumped in to saved the child, and he himself died. So the question is obviously, what obligations do you have? But obviously, if you take the job as a lifeguard, all that changes it. But you were talking about you can save the person and you don't save the person. How do we know that there's a law that you must try to save the person if you can? So you can't just stand there. You have to protect your friend from being killed. So the Gemara says, you're right. We won't learn it from that pasuk. That pasuk is coming to teach us that in general, a person cannot stand and just watch a person die if they could intervene and help the person. But it's not teaching us about killing a pursuer, whereas someone's murdering. Although seemingly, I'm not sure why the Gemara is having such a hard time with it. We could include the rodef in such a case. But the Mishnah doesn't want to, because it's coming to teach us just about an attitude of a person who is not necessarily killing someone else, but saving someone. Right here, the case of the listim. Let's say the case of the listim. It's not talking about you killing the robbers. You could protect the person by hiding them. So there's nothing that doesn't teach you that you could kill the robbers. It just teaches us that you better protect the person that may be killed or die from drowning. So the Gemara says, you're right. We can't use that verse. That verse just comes to teach us that you must save someone from dying, but doesn't prove that you could kill someone to save someone from dying. And so how do you know that you could save a person, like Rashi says, from committing a crime with their life if need be. So Isa b'kal v'chomer. We learn it from a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer is one of the rules of Torah that teach us that if something more lenient is that you're able to do, surely something more severe you should be able to do or not do. That's the general rule of a kal v'chomer. Kal means something light, chomer means something more severe. So if something light would have the law that you're allowed to kill the pursuer, so even something more severe, surely you could kill the pursuer. What's the light case of a pursuer? So minayar ma'usa, an engaged girl. What's the end of this day? At the end of the day is that the woman who's going to be molested, at the end of the day is she's going to survive, she's going to live, but she's going to be pogam, she's going to be damaged by the rapist, but she's going to live. So the Gemorah looks at a scenario of rape as being kal versus a scenario of murder. So if the case of the engaged woman, the Torah tells us, Amar Torah nitin lahatzila b'nafshay, we have a clear verse in the Torah that we're going to learn soon, that the Torah tells us in Kiseitse that there was no one there to help her, meaning if there was someone there to help her, he should have helped her and killed the rapist. So therefore, and if in the case of rape, you're allowed to kill the rapist. We're turning to page 73a2. So surely murder, which the Gemara says is worse than rape, is even more so. I just want to say, the Torah is obviously looking at it from the perspective of the law, and I'm quite certain that there's no scenario of legal system that's going to say that rape is more severe than murder. I don't believe this. And maybe Bruce, again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but in civil law, I don't believe they either believe that rape is considered a more severe crime than murder. I'm not saying that both of them are bad. I'm saying if you have to measure them. But I know that clearly that I was told this by my wife's grandmother, that in World War II, in the time of the Holocaust, the young girls were given pills, cyanide pills, that if they felt that they were going to be taken advantage of when they were being taken into the camps, that they had the choice to commit suicide rather than being raped. So obviously it depends on, that's a difference between a person deciding what they want to do versus what the Torah says on an action basis. The Torah looks at murder as being more severe because at the end of the day, the Torah says you do survive a rape, and after, as horrible it is, and it could be you'll never totally recover from it, but you are still alive. So the Torah says.
How does this relate to the story of Masada? That they willingly killed themselves rather than become slaves and women to be raped.
It's a hard question. I know. I mean, and I'm not sure what the Torah talks.
It also happened at Gamla. At Gamla, they jumped off the top of the mountain. And
then it happened also in the boat. They took a boat of girls and boys, clearly to be sold as sex slaves.
The reason I ask is because clearly it's prevalent throughout history in the Jewish communities that it was an acceptable solution that the community agreed upon to do. And even, I'm just curious how to kind of relate that to this concept here.
Yeah, I mean, again, because that's a personal decision versus the Torah. That means when the Torah has to look at the crime being done, the Torah has a calculated, so to say, if you could call it that, observation. At the end, the Torah says, 1 second, death versus rape. At the end of the day, the Torah says you survive rape, and you can build off that. You can have a family after that. You could live a life after that, as hard as it may be. There's nothing you could do once you're killed, obviously. So in Kal or Chomer, the Torah views this is till today. Literally, I heard parents saying by these victims that have been kidnapped by Hamas. Now, I've heard more than one parent saying, "I hope she's dead," and saying about their own daughter. I hope she's dead. I'd rather she be dead than being put in the situation that she's now. So again, that's an emotional or personal, but the Torah can't view it that way. The Torah doesn't view that. You listen. The Torah says, of course, if someone's pursuing someone else to rape them, you kill them. And Torah's not making light of rape. But if you had to look what of the two, and you wanted to say, so therefore the Torah is able. The Gemara is trying to build a basis that if you're allowed to kill a rapist, surely you're allowed to kill a murderer. Because the murderer, at the end of the day, the Torah, like the Gemara says, And in the pagma, there's a pagam, but a pagam is not as bad as death. Again, as unemotional as this sounds, I don't believe there's a legal system in the world that would say that if you had of the two, that you would say murder legally is better than. I mean, if people decide, like you're saying, over the history, the Jews they made that decision, where the kids jumped off the boat and Masada and up until these days, where parents are talking like that, and unfortunately, chas v'shalom, that there should ever be such a situation, but it is, and so the Torah has to talk from the halacha point of view. Ariel, is there anything from Rabbi Adin on this, Rabbi Steinsaltz?
Not so much more than what I read earlier.
Yeah, so like Rashi says, Rashi uses two words about rape. And Rashi says that when Rashi says lepoigma, the word lepoigma in English they translate here is let's go back this page. Lepoigma says comes only to blemisher. Okay. Footnote number 8 says humiliate. So the footnote quotes Rashi. Rashi quotes two words: levaisha, which is humiliate. That the zalzala is more than humiliation, because this rape is not just about humiliation. There's also trauma. It's not just humiliation; it's the trauma of the act of rape. I think that's the zilzul, but it's also based on shame and honor, and therefore Torah says that if you're allowed to kill for that, you're allowed to kill for murder. All right, let's continue.
It's interesting just on that last note, because one of the many reasons somewhere peppered throughout the Talmud of matrilineal communication of like someone being Jewish has to do, like the psychological aspect of it at least, has to do with supporting somebody who's been raped and having that person be a part of the community and keeping them, from being ostracized or having their child not be accepted, that kind of thing. And so clearly the Gemara, in some places at least, has this idea of the physical and the psychological and the long-term all kind of intertwined, being like damaging, and they also have similar examples in other parts in the Torah when it talks about making somebody embarrassed, and it causes them to shed blood, and it's almost as like murder or death, or there's a lot of similes like this, I think, that can help kind of understand the long-term trauma of it, and still comparing that and saying it's not as bad as death.
Now I'll tell you something else. I think there's also a silver lining over here, and that is we know the stories of the kids that did jump off the boat, and we know the stories of the people that did rather choose death or rape, and we know the choices that they gave the pills to the young women in the Holocaust. Not all the women took the pills, and not everyone chose death over honor. And I think by the Gemara saying it's kal also gives space for the person who chose life over honor, over trauma, to say that don't feel bad about that choice. Don't because if the Torah would say that murder is lighter than rape, then any person who wanted to live, chose life over the trauma of getting raped, may feel like they've done the wrong thing and they didn't have the courage to do the right thing. Now, at the end of the day, the Torah says, we're going to learn soon, it's not so simple, that a person, if a person has to fight till the death not to be raped, he can't willingly do it. That's one of the things which is Yaharg Val Yavar. It means you have to, even if you have to die trying, you have to make sure it doesn't happen. But if it happens, you shouldn't look at it and say that murder was the lighter thing and I didn't have the courage to do it. That at the end of the day, life is more important, because the Gemara says "Alel lepoigma." Okay, so let's continue. So he says, if rape, you could kill a rapist, then surely you could kill a murderer. So the Gemara says, I understand what you're saying, but we have a technical problem with using this logic as the basis of killing someone who's about to commit murder. Why? The rule is you can't use a kal v'chomer for death penalty. You can't punish someone based on a kal v'chomer. This is a very important rule. Kal v'chomer is a logical argument, right? We just had a conversation for 5 minutes about the logic of why murder is more severe than rape. But that's a logical argument that we could have a conversation about. It's logic. Logic is saying that rape is less than murder. But Torah doesn't want to open up that you could use logic for punishment. We use logic, kal v'chomer, for many rules in Torah, but it doesn't allow it when it comes to Einshin. Why? Because your logic is maybe not someone else's logic. Maybe someone else looks at it differently. And maybe rape is worse than murder. So the Torah doesn't, because kal v'chomer was given over to the rabbis to use as a logical argument. A logical argument is a very dangerous path when it comes to allowing a person, because you know what? There's people out there today that will logically say that what was done in the south of Israel was right. And as horrible as that may sound, they could use their logic. So if you don't have basis for rules that has beyond logic, which is either the Torah says so, or we have a Masorah, we have a beyond logic reason why the rule would be this way, to leave it open to interpretation, which is what a kal v'chomer is, that Torah says we don't do that. So that's an amazing rule, by the way, because Torah, you see how Torah struggles to make sure that we don't leave space for radical behavior, or for sometimes, because society can go illogical. It's not just that an individual is going to make an illogical comparison. Society can make a choice that today's society decides what's considered chomer and what's considered kal. In Sodom, the entire society of Sodom felt they were right. It wasn't like they were saying we're going to commit murder. They said this is what we're doing is the law. They said this is the law. This is how we think people should behave. A robber should be rewarded, and a person who's robbed should be punished. That was their constitution. So therefore, the Torah says that's very dangerous to allow logic when it comes to Einshin. That's what Gemorah says. Do we allow Einshin? Do we allow punishment from a kal v'chomer? And so we don't. So therefore, we can't, as much as it may logically make sense that if rape is, you're allowed to kill the rapist, then surely you're allowed to kill the murderer. But we don't apply logic when it comes to Einshin, to punishment. So therefore, we have to find something else to teach us. So far, we have no basis yet that you're allowed to kill a person who's pursuing murder. So the Gemara continues, Devei Rabbi Tana Hekeshehu, says there's a Hekesh. Hekesh is one of the rules of Torah, which is not illogical. And Hekesh, like Rashi says, a Hekesh is when you compare two verses. But not that any person could compare two verses. Shuki, Ari, Mendy, Bruce could say, oh, wow, this verse says this, that verse says that. It must be the Torah is coming to teach us something. A Hekesh has to have a Masorah. Means it came down Halacha Moshe Sinai. Now, it could be, when we have an argument if there's a Hekesh or not, it could be that one person has the Masorah that Moses told his students, who told his Rebbe, all the way down from Moses, that these two verses are comparable and are bouncing off each other to teach a law, or not. But it's not based on logic, because logic you can't punish based on logic. By the way, I just want to say, you see, when you go through the fine print of the Talmud, you really appreciate the system of Torah, because the Torah really is careful of all times in all situations. And what could be simple logic today may be a flawed logic tomorrow, and the Torah did not allow for that, an opening for that. But a Hekesh comes out from Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's the way it is. So he says we have a Hekesh. So what is the Hekesh? We're going to learn an interesting Hekesh. What's the story of the rapist? So we're going to, those who have the R scroll, the verses on the side, the right hand side, it's talking about in Parashat Kiseitze says that the woman is out in the field and she gets raped. In the city, they both get punished, because in the city, the Torah says, why didn't she call out for help? Means that she was a willing participant. So therefore, just like she was an engaged woman who had a relationship, it's not rape, it's a relationship. Why didn't she call out for help? Obviously, if there's proof that she couldn't call out for help, and obviously then the Torah doesn't, just because she was raped in the city, it's just giving an idea. The idea when the woman's a willing participant, then it's considered a relationship. When she's not a willing participant, let's say she's in the field, and her screams would go on deaf ears because no one's there, So therefore, we say that she was raped, and therefore we say that nothing happens to her. But what's the verse? The verse says like this. This is in Devarim. So they're in the field, and the young woman who's engaged is being raped. Again, in Torah, a woman who's not engaged or not married, obviously, who has relationships even willingly, it's not something the Torah agrees to, but that's not punishable by death. And to this young woman who's engaged only, we don't do anything in the case that she was raped in the field. If you look at the wording, or those who have the verse in front of them, there's no hey there. The Torah has the word nar, which means a young boy, even though we're talking about a young girl. So there's no hey there. She didn't do anything maves. She didn't do a sin that's punishable by death. Why? Because she was raped. It wasn't her fault. And the Torah gives a comparison. It's very rare for the Torah to use this kind of language. Just like a person would kill another person, nefesh, you would kill the person is killing a soul, and therefore you can't accuse the person being murdered. It's the murderer who's committing the crime. There's no difference. The Torah says there's no difference between a person being murdered and a person being raped. The person being murdered didn't do anything wrong. The lady being raped didn't do anything wrong. And it's just like you can't obviously punish the person who's being murdered. You can't punish the engaged woman who's being raped. So that's the verse that the Torah says. So this is the Hekesh. The Hekesh says like this. So what is the problem with this verse? The problem with this verse is, even though it's nice that the Torah is talking it out to make it romantic, that the woman being giving it a whole like flavor, that just like you wouldn't accuse the person being murdered, you wouldn't accuse the woman. But the Torah has to teach us something. Why is the Torah telling us? So the Torah said before, we don't punish the woman. So the end of the story. Why do we have to give a whole example that she's like a person being murdered? That seems like the pasuk is extra. So this is the Hekesh. Now the Gemara quotes again. This is Hekesh here. The verse says, Ki kasher yokom ish is just like if a person were to kill another person, nefesh. So the Gemara says, 1 second, what are we trying to teach us about from a murderer, miyata? So the Gemara says a very interesting thing. This is a case where seemingly it's coming to teach us about the rape, but it's really coming to learn from the rape. Because the verse is extra, what's the verse coming to teach us? That a person who's being raped is like a person who's being murdered. We already said that the woman doesn't get punished. Why do you have to compare it to murder? So really, the pasuk is hinting to us that we actually learn murder from the rape. And what do we learn? We learn just like you're allowed to kill the rapist, you're allowed to kill the murderer. That's the Hekesh. So it's called a Hekesh, and the rule is, and Rashi says, that you still have to learn something from the case of the murderer, and what it comes to teach us is that the woman's she has to fight for her life for it, just like a person has to fight for not to you have to prevent from getting killed. You also have to prevent. You have to try not to be raped. But the case over here is that we also learn murder from rape. Rashi says, okay, we'll learn later in the Gemara is going to go back to this, that we also learn from, in the case of rapists, we learn for the case of from the case of murder. But the fact that we add this language in the pasuk is really coming to teach us that that murder is allowed to be protected, just like rape is allowed to be protected. Okay, so that's what the city, the yeshiva of Rebbe says. They came to teach us. It learns. We compare murder to an engaged woman. The Gemara says, just like an engaged woman, you could save her with killing the rapist. So too in the case of murder, you could save the murderer from himself, or save the victim by killing, if you need to, by killing the murderer. Okay, so let's stop here. Hold on a second. Okay, let's actually do the one last piece, and then we'll stop by the next case. The Gemara says a few more lines. The Gemara says, "V'nayim Marisa Gufa Minawan." How do we know that a woman who's being raped, an engaged woman who's being raped, that you let us save her by killing the rapist if you need to? It says the Tanit Vei Rabbi Shmuel, like this, the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel says. The Tanit Vei Rabbi Shmuel, the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel says, "Ve'ein Le'Shi'ala." There's no one to help her. Why does the Torah say there's no one to help her? Why does that have anything to play? If she's being raped, she's being raped, that she doesn't get punished. But why do we have to say there's no one to save her? It's coming to teach us, if there's someone to save her, he should, or she, whoever the savior is, should save the woman from being raped any way she can. If you could hurt the person, hurt the person. If you have to kill the person, kill the person. But from the very fact that the Torah says there was no one there to save her, that seems to be extra verbiage in the Mishnah and in the verse, because we don't need, the Torah doesn't seem to have anything to do with the case, whether there was someone to save her or not. So the fact is that the Torah is coming to teach us that if there was someone to save her, you should save her. That's why before we finish off over here, Tosfos asked a question about, I just want to go about before we finish. Tosfos asked the question about comparing rape to murder. Tosfos actually doesn't accept it so fast. Tosfos says, one second, when it comes to the punishment of a rapist versus the punishment of a murderer, the punishment of a rapist of a woman who's engaged is a more severe punishment, means by the Beis Din, than a murderer. Let's say, right, someone rapes a married woman, an engaged woman, and someone rapes a murders someone. It's the act is done. There's no one to save them. There's no case of a question of you could have killed it. It's the crime's already been committed, with warning, witnesses, and now you come to the Beis Din. What is the punishment for someone who rapes an engaged woman? Skila. That person gets stoned, which is, we learned before, is the most severe punishment. What's the punishment for murder? Sayif, a beheading. Beheading, which is the sword, is a less, according to all opinions, is not the means there's the argument we learned a few parakim before. If skila is more severe than burning, and if the sword is more severe than choking, but everyone agrees that skila versus the knife, the sword, skila is more severe. So if we see the punishment for rape is more severe, how could we use a kal v'chomer? Right? We see that rape is a more severe punishment. So it's a more severe case. So Tosfos says an interesting thing. It says lav pirchi. That's not a question. When it comes to the case of saving the person or stopping the act, it's not about the transgression that's done. It's about it's about who's being affected and how that person's being affected. Murder is a worse act as far as what's happening to the person, the victim, than rape, like we said before. Because even though the transgression is worse by rape and you get stoned, but vis-a-vis the victim, the pegima, he calls it, the pegima is worse because you're not alive. At the end of the day, you're not alive. And he says, why? How do we know? How do we know? Tosfos gives a proof. How do we know that the act, the effect of murders is worse than the effect of rape? Because if she would agree to do it, then all of a sudden it's not the same thing. Or let's say she says she's not agreeing to it, but she's not in a case where she cares so much about the trauma of it. She's not ready to make a scene out of it. So he says we're going to learn that if it's not a case where she's screaming that her honor is being affected, either she agrees or she doesn't feel like it's such a big imiter. She doesn't mind that, even though she's not agreeing to it. You're not allowed to kill the person. It means you're not allowed to kill the rapist if the woman doesn't show that she minds what's happening. If the woman says whatever, she doesn't like it, but she's not screaming for help, and she doesn't. So then the Torah says you're not allowed to kill the rapist. So what do we see from here? It's all about the pekima. It's all about if she's being offended at, how damaged is she being, how much trauma is she going through, and therefore it's considered lighter than murder because there's no such thing as a person saying, "I don't mind if I die." The Chas v'Shalom, they have situations like that, but is ein matzilas benafshita like kemiduchim shmaitin. And he says Rashi is Tosfos finished up. Upshita dish begam godol in the harag. It's much worse to kill someone than a woman who's engaged who gets raped. Now he asks, and how do we know that we kill about maybe we care about the severity of the sin versus how offended the person is? Maybe so what if the woman's not offended? But the sinner is the severity of the sin that's being done. So Tosfos brings a proof that's not about the severity, because we see that when it comes to Avodah Zarah, you don't have to kill someone, you don't have to prevent someone from worshiping idols by killing them, even though it's one of the worst sins you could do. It's the first of the 10 Commandments. So from there we see it's not about the sin, it's about the effect of the sin. And when it comes to the effect of the sin, the Torah says any way you cut it, the Torah does not the Gemorah doesn't say as bad as rape is, no one's putting it down. But when you have to compare it between rape and murder, the kal is rape and the chomer is murder. All right, everyone, next week we'll finish off. It's not an easy sugya, it doesn't get easier. With a lot of Rashis and Tosfos to kind of just give us a direction. But La'al Tov, and thanks for joining. Take care.